Hello friends, welcome back to Arthvimarsh. This is intermediate microeconomics and we are discussing the second chapter, that is the budget constraints. Now today we are interested to look into two key questions, that is what is the impact of change in income and change in prices on the budget line. If you like the content of these videos, please like, subscribe and share our channel. So far we have been talking about the budget constraints, and we have already talked about that what is a budget set, how it looks like, and how do we represent a particular budget equation. Like we had given this form for two bundle of goods. So the equation was given as M equals price time quantity of good 1 plus price time quantity of good 2, right? And we know that why this equal sign was there. If you are not clear with this point, you may consider visiting the previous video. So we have seen that how to represent a budget line graphically and how do we get the slope of the budget line, right? So given this, today we are interested to look into the two key questions, that is what is the impact of change in income and prices on the budget line, and also how programs like taxes, subsidies and rationing affect the budget line. So given this background, let's proceed with today's two key questions. So we are interested to look into what will be the impact of change in M, because we have been denoting M as income in the budget line when we derived the equation, and also prices were denoted as P1 and P2 respectively. So we are interested to look into what will be the impact on the budget line if the price of one of the commodity changes or both may also change. So what kind of impact is going to be there on the budget line, and also how the taxes or subsidies or rationing like programs are going to affect our budget line. So given this, let's proceed further. So first of all, let's talk about the change in income and the impact on the budget line. So as we have seen that the equation of the budget line was given as M equals P1 times quantity of good 1 plus price time quantity of good 2 being consumed, right? Now we are interested to look into what happens when the income is going to change, that is this M is going to change. Now we are taking a hypothetical scenario that a consumer has an option. Okay, now initially he had 100 rupees of income. Okay, now his income increase in M by 60. Say for example by 60 rupees I am increasing his income. Now it's 160. Now given this 160, okay, initially with 100 rupees he could have brought some amount of X1 and X2 bundle, and similarly now with this 160 he can purchase some amount of X1 and X2. And how much change is going to be there, right? How our budget line is going to change, we are interested to look into that. Now let me just give an example to explain this. Say for example you are trying to choose between consuming ice cream and lemonade. You want to consume either of them, or you can consume both of them also. Initially the consumer had an income of 100 rupees. Given that the price of the lemonade was X1 commodity was 5 rupees. Okay, so this was P1 and the P2 was 4, right? Now we know that if we have to get the budget line for this equation, if we have to represent on the graph, so we have to obtain the coordinates of X1 and X2, so where they intersect the x-axis. So for X1 equals 0, we have X2 equals 25, and for X2 equals 0, we have X1 equals 20, right? So let us plot this point graphically here. So for X1 0, we have X2 equals 25, and for X2 equals 0, we have X1 equals 20. So these are the 2 points, right? So let us join these 2 points so that it remains clear that what we are talking about. So this is one of the budget line which we will be having, right? So this is one of the budget line which we have obtained by having the initial conditions in place, that our income was 100 and we had to choose between those 2 bundles, right? So now let's talk about the second case. Okay, now in the second case, if you observe, our income has increased by 60, right? So M increased by 60. So what we have now is the combination of x1 and x2 intersecting the x and y axis respectively at, for x1 equal to 0 we have x2 equals to 40, and for x2 equal to 0 we have x1 equals how much? X1 equals 32, right? Yeah. So let us plot this point also. Now x1 will be for x2 equal to 0 we have x1 is equal to 32, and for x2 equals x1 equals 0 we have x2 equal to 40, right? This is the point. Now let us combine these points as well so that we can get a clear picture of what our budget line looks like. Okay, so it is somewhere here, right? But is it going to be parallel or not? I mean, if we see it visually, it looks like that it's parallel, right? But we have to be sure, right? So let us name this line as A prime B prime, and the initial line which we had was, this is 30, this is 20. Okay, so let us name this as AB, right? Now we know that initial line was this, and we have shifted from here to here. AB to a shift from AB to A prime B prime, right? This is the shift we have witnessed because of change in income. So is it parallel or not? So if we get back to this figure, you know that the slope of the budget line is given as the ratio of the prices of commodity 1 to that of 2. So similarly, if we derive the slope for both these cases, right? So the slope will be given, for example, for first case I am saying M1 as a slope, it is equal to minus P1. What is P1? 5, right? 5 upon P2, that is 4 here, right? So P1 upon P2, that is equal to minus 1.2, right? This is M1, the initial line's slope. Now for the other line, if we calculate the slope here, is equal to minus 5 upon 4, which is same, which is equal to minus 1.2, that is M2, right? You see, these prices remain same. So what we were discussing here, that among these substitute, the consumer had a choice to choose between lemonade or ice cream. Okay, and what happens that initially whatever combination is affordable, initially if you see from the figure, what is affordable is within this area, right? This was affordable, this area was affordable, A, O, B, right, initially. But later on, when his income has gone up, now if you see his affordable portion, it has increased significantly by this area, right, which you can observe here in the figure. So this is the increment. So overall now what he can afford is A prime O B. This is the affordable region, right? What we used to call as budget set, right? Budget set. So now this is affordable, right? A prime OB. So what we have observed, that when income is increasing for a consumer, given the prices remain same for the two goods, we are witnessing a parallel shift in the budget line as represented by AB and A prime B prime, and also you can see the slopes are same. So this is what the figure summarizes here. And also to summarize, that increase in M, here M is the income, makes a parallel shift outwards, and the vertical intercept, this is the vertical intercept, it increases and the slope remains the same. which we have observed that our vertical intercept has increased from 30 to 40, right? And the slope has remained same. So slope is equal to k, which means it remains constant. So remember this point about how this shift occurs, because later on whenever we are going to study the dynamics of taxation or anything, subsidies, this is how it's going to work, I mean on the graphs. So now let's move on to the next concept, that is what is the impact of change in price on the budget line. Now taking the similar case which we have discussed in the previous example, that for x1 we are supposing that this is, for example, lemonade. Okay, this is lemonade and this is ice cream. Now you have to choose between these two, right? But what happens that suddenly from price of rupees 4, okay, the price changes to 5 for x1, which is your lemonade. So what happens that, assume price of x1, which is lemonade, increases, okay, by how much? By 1 unit. That is, if initially it is 4, okay, now it has increased to 5. So price of x1 increases by rupee 1 or any other currency unit, like it can be dollar or anything whichever you want to assume. Okay, so this is what happens. Now we are interested to see that what happens, I mean, when this change is occurring. Now the consumer has a choice to make between buying a lemonade at 5, or he can choose ice cream also, right? Both are being, I mean, charged same price. But now here if you see, initially it was not the case. Initially lemonade was costing less, right? It was costing 1 rupee less. So this is what the case was. So now let us try to understand how the budget line is going to get affected in this case. Now similarly we are going to repeat the what we did in the last case. We are going to get the coordinates for the respective axis for x1 and x2, and similarly for this case as well, right? So we will be getting the coordinates for the line which we are getting after the price has changed or the price has increased, right? So first of all let's talk about the first case. So for x1 equals 0, we get the intersection for x2 at 20 yeah. So for x1 equals for x2 equals 0, we get the intersection at 25, right? Similarly in this case, now when the price of the lemonade has increased, so now in this case what we have is, for x1 equals 0 we have x2 equals 20, and for x2 equals 0 we have x1 equals 20. Now let us plot these 2 points. Let's plot for the second equation first. Yeah, this is the point. Okay, so this is what is going to be the case. I'm just joining these lines. Pardon me for this bad representation. Imagine it's a straight line. Then for the second case, what's happening is, I mean the first case initially for x1 equal to 0 we had x2 equals 20, right? It is the same point. So this is the same point. In this case this is going to overlap. Then for x2 equals 0 we had x1 equals 25. So x1 was 25. So this was basically the initial case which we had, right? So just to make it more clear, I'll be representing it with the line so that it gives you a more clear picture. All right, so yeah, so I hope this is more clear now. Yeah, so this is how it looks like. The initial line segment, if you observe, which is A B, okay, now it has changed due to the price increase of the good one, that is lemonade, to B prime. Okay, now the price has changed, I mean the budget line has shifted from AB to AB prime, now wherein the quantity of x1 being consumed is less, right? See the x1, it's 20, right? And here it's how much? 25, right? This was 25. Yeah, so obviously there is a inward shift if you observe. Okay, now let's get back to what it says. So what is the impact of change in price on the budget line? So if the price is going to change, definitely the budget line is going to get a shift inwards. Okay, but in terms of slope, what is going to happen? Let us see. What is the slope of this line? It's the price ratio of the prices, right? Negative of P1. What is P1? It's 4, right? This is P1, this is P2, and similarly for this is P1, this is P2, right? So what is the ratio? Minus 4 upon 5, which is equal to minus 0.8. Let's call this M1. And what is the case for this one? M2 equals to minus P1 upon P2, which is equal to 1. So you just compare the slopes. So pardon, this is negative. Okay, now both are decreasing, obviously that's why the negative sign is there, but they're not equal like the previous case, right? So what has happened? Now you have witnessed an increase in the slope. So what happened? That it shifted from AB to AB prime. So in this direction the shift has taken place, right? Like you can think of clockwise shift in the point B, right? So this is what the change is due to alteration in the price of the lemonade. Now if you notice here, what it says, that increase in the price of the commodity 1, that is lemonade we had assumed, makes the budget line more steeper, that is more steeper. Okay, and the vertical intercept remains the same and the slope changes. So if you observe, this is the vertical intercept, right? This is the vertical intercept. So this is going to remain same. Okay, this is going to remain same. Only what is going to change is the slope. Like this had a slope greater than the slope of this line was less than that of this line, like you have observed. Like AB prime had a greater slope than AB. So this is about what impact the price change induces on the budget line. Now let's talk about if both the prices on the budget line are going to change. Now what do we mean by both the prices changing? So here we simply mean that, for example, we had the equation of the form, if you recall, we had the equation M equals P1 x1 plus P2 x2, right? Now it is saying that let us multiply all the prices by T times, okay? And it's similar to dividing everything by M itself, the income itself. How? Let us see. Now say for example I am multiplying the price P1 by T1 times amount of good x1 plus T times P2 x2, okay, and this is equal to M, right? I am applying this thing, this condition, right? So by this I get this, fine. So this further implies what? That I can write my P1 x1 plus P2 x2 and take out the T common equal to M. So P1 x1 plus P2 x2 equals M upon T, right? Which exactly is this, right? So this is what it's stating. So it means that if both the prices on the budget line are increasing by same amount, say for example if it had a price in this previous case, for example if it was 4, 5 respectively, price 1 was 4 and price 2 was 5. So similarly, if I multiply both the prices by same amount, for example M is equal to 10x1 plus 5x2 was the initial case, and what I did, I multiplied the prices by 5, so it will be 5 times x1 plus 5 times 10x1, right? 10x1 plus 5 times 10x2, right? 5 times 5x2, so this will be equal to m equals 50x1 plus 25x2, right? And what it will give, if I take out 25 common, so, or I can take out 5 as common, right? I mean, if I have to give this kind of representation, so it will be similar to this equation, that is m equals 10x1 plus 5x2, and the 5 which is common, I can bring that to the denominator, so I'll get the same expression as this is mentioning, right? So this is what happens as a consequence of the change in price of both the goods. So let's move further. Now what it is saying is that what happens if we multiply all prices and income by T. So what will happen to the budget line? Because in this previous case which I just discussed, you observe that it's as simple as you are dividing m by T. So if your m was going to get divided by T, which means, for example, I'm just taking the case, okay, for this one. Your initial equation was, for example, 100 is equal to 5x plus 10x2, okay. This was the initial equation. When you multiplied, okay, multiply prices by 5, so we got 100 upon 5 is equal to 5x1 plus 10x2. This was our expression, right? So net effect, where is it making? Only on the income, right? So income is going to get divided. So if on the budget line, say for example, this was my budget line, okay, if my m is getting divided by T, that essentially means I'm talking about what we had discussed in the case where our income was shifting, right? So for example, can we think of this case as similar to this one? Because see here, your income was being added, okay. So now what is happening here? So here also, if you observe how your graph will emerge, is this will be 20, right? Now if you compare both the cases, like this had 100 income, right? 100 is equal to 5x1 plus 10x2, right? This equation. But now the new equation is 20 rupees. Now you only have 20 rupees in your pocket to choose among good 1 and good 2, which are costing rupees 5 and 10 respectively. So obviously your budget is going to shrink, so that will be shifting backwards, right? I can show you with an example also. Say for example, if we solve for 20, right, for 20, the case for 20, when we have 20 is equal to 5x1 plus 10x2, okay. So if I solve for this case, what happens is I am getting for x1 equals 0, okay, for x1 equals 0, I get x2 equals how much? 2, right? And x2 equals 0, I get x1 equals 4 units. So you just observe that your consumption bundle has gone down. Say for example, if this was 2 and this is 4, I mean this is a hypothetical scenario, right? This is 2, this is 4, say for example. Now initially if you observe for this equation, what would you have? 100 is equal to 5x1 plus 10x2. So x1, x2, if I solve for both, what I get is for x1 0, x2 was 10, and for x2 0, I was getting x1 equals 20, right? So 0, 20 was the first coordinate, so this was around 20, right? This was around 10 and this was around 20. So obviously now there is a shift backward, right? And in terms of slope, if you may compare, it's 10, 5 by 10, right? 5 by 10, 1 upon 2, right? and for this case, if you check the slope, what will it be? So it will be 5 upon 10. That is same, right? So the lines are going to be parallel lines. So that's why I'm saying it's going to shift inwards. So this is the impact of having similar increase in the price of both the commodities. Now what happens when they are multiplying all the prices and income by T? Okay, so when all the prices and income are being multiplied by T, it doesn't change the budget line. This is what they essentially try to convey. Now how is that happening? Now if you observe in the equation, okay, we are throughout multiplying by T. On the both left and right hand side, the income is being multiplied by T and the prices are also being multiplied, right? So overall what is happening, this T is getting cancelled with this T, okay, these two T's, because this can be written as T common P1 x1 plus P2 x2 equals to Tm, and this T and T will be cancelled and you get this expression. Alright, now a perfectly balanced inflation does not change the consumption of possibility. So inflation, you know, that is persistence in the rise of prices over a period of time. So if inflation we denote by the symbol pi, okay, so if this is not increasing, that essentially, I mean, what it basically means that your prices are not increasing, okay. Balanced inflation means both prices of both the commodities are, I mean, increasing in equal proportion, I mean in equal manner, so that there is no differential, and as a consequence these values are equal. That's why it's same T. So there will be no impact, okay. A perfectly balanced inflation does not change consumption possibilities. So this is what it essentially means, because your budget line remains same, that is P1 x1 plus P2 x2 when the entire equation is being multiplied by T on both the sides, right? So this is what it essentially means. Now let us shift further to understand what is the impact of taxes on the budget. Now when we talk about the taxes, we generally classify them under three heads when we try to study them, okay. Number one is quantity tax. So it's based on the quantity being consumed here. So for example, in our equation we had P1 x1 plus P2 x2. So here x1 and x2 are the two goods, and this essentially implies the quantity which is being consumed, okay. Now what it says, that quantity tax, okay, what it says that consumer pays amount T for each unit she purchases. Say for example 5 units are being purchased, okay, so essentially that amount of tax is going to be there. So that's why that much amount is going to be charged. So that means that price of the good one, for example, is say for example you are getting taxed on good one if you are buying good one, okay. So good one can be anything, like in our previous case, like we have assumed it to be lemonade, right? So for example, if you 1 unit of lemonade you are buying, so you are being taxed with T amount, okay, with T amount of tax. So obviously on quantity we are not directly adding tax price, okay. So P plus T will be the P1 for good one price, right? P1 plus T will be the new price after tax. All right, so this is clear, right? So now let's talk about the next point. So the next point states that VAT, value added tax, or we also call it ad valorem tax, okay. So what essentially happens, it's denoted by tau, okay, this is the Greek symbol tau. So basically this is paid in proportion of the price, okay. A price being charged, for example 5 rupees we had assumed for good one and 4 rupees for this. So as a proportion of price, this is going to get charged, okay. Say for example 10% of P1, okay, so which essentially means P1 plus 10% of P1 will be the new price, right? So this is obviously going to increase your price, and what happens to the budget line when your price is going to increase, we have already understood, so you can draw the plot accordingly, right? So this is what it essentially means. But if you need specific figures to understand, please do let me know in the comment section. I can draw them for you. So next one is lump sum tax. This is something which is charged approximately, okay, as the name says. So the amount of tax is independent of the consumer's choice, which means regardless of the quantity which you are talking about in the equation, okay, independent of consumer's choice. So regardless of quantity, it's being charged. Doesn't matter how much amount of x1 or x2 is being consumed, it's directly being charged, right? So what it essentially means, say for example you have the equation of the form like we have been understanding, like p1x1 plus p2x2, okay, wherein p are the prices and x1 x2 are the amount of goods. X1 and X2 are the amount of goods which are being consumed by the consumer in his consumption bundle. So when a lump sum tax is being charged, say for example I am charging 100 rupees lump sum tax, okay, or 100 unit of currency as a lump sum tax on your income M. So that essentially means that M is being subtracted by 100 rupees and the equation remains same, okay. So this is what happens, and you know that what kind of shift is going to be there on the budget line, right? It's going to shift backwards when this kind of thing is going to happen, because your income is shrinking. So a parallel backward shift will be there in the budget line, because your P1 and P2 are remaining same. So essentially the slope will remain same because the ratio of the slope is P1 upon P2. So it will be similar to that of the shift in the income, right? So this is about the impact of taxes on the budget. Now let's move on to understand what is the impact of subsidies on the budget. Now when we talk about the subsidies, so subsidies you can think of as opposite to that of the taxes, okay. Now to begin with, we can again classify subsidies under three heads. Number one, the quantity based, okay, number two, ad valorem, and number three, lump sum. So similar implications are going to be there in terms of subsidies, but only what happens is by taxation our prices are going to increase, and by subsidy obviously it's a kind of relief or compensation being provided, so the prices are going to decrease. So say for example as we had our general expression for the budget line, M equals P1 x1 plus P2 x2, okay. So what happens essentially as a consequence of subsidy, say for example on x1 good. Now subsidies are generally offered on goods, say for example public goods, for example, or some public welfare schemes, for example loan to the farmers, etc. So say for example government announces that 30% waiver is going to be there on a particular loan or on some food stamp program, etc. okay. So that is going to be there. So what it implies is, say for example I am providing subsidy on good one's price, okay. Say for example its price was 100 rupees, but I am providing 30 rupees subsidy, okay, subsidy of 30 rupees. So what happens, the net price which you will get is 100 minus 30, so you will have to pay only 70 rupees essentially. So this is the impact of subsidy. So what happens, the price reduces for the good on which the subsidy is being provided. Now second one is ad valorem subsidy. Now what happens, like in the previous case also we talked about that ad valorem subsidy means that it is something which is being provided on a proportion of the price, as a proportion of price. So say for example on the price which we had assumed in this case, for example 100 was the price of good one, okay. On this, if I am providing ad valorem subsidy, it means that proportion of 100, like for example 10% of x1, okay, for example 10% of p1, price of x1 is p1, right? So 10% of subsidy on the price of x1 commodity, that is p1, is getting subsidized by 10% for the good x1. So what it means, for 100 rupees how much you will get, 10% of 100, it's equal to 10 rupees, right? So which means you pay essentially the price of 100 minus 10, right? So you are paying only 90 rupees on P1, right, if it's being subsidized. Now finally the case for the lump sum subsidy. Now for lump sum subsidy, again the impact is going to be like that of a tax, right? If no, not tax. Basically it's going to increase your income, net income. Why? Say for example you had an initial case of P1 x1 plus P2 x2. Now when your subsidy is being provided, okay, say for example S is the lump sum subsidy. Now this is obviously being added to your income, right? This is being added to your income. This is not something which is being taken away. So essentially when this is being added to your income, so your equation becomes, what will be the equation? It will be M plus S, right? M plus S equals P1 x1 plus P2 x2. And how will the budget line look like? It will be similar to that of a shift being induced, outward shift being induced, because your essentially your income is going up and there is no change on the P1 and P2 values. So your slope minus P1 upon P2, this remains constant, right? This remains constant. So which means the parallel shift is going to be there. Okay, so this is, for example, if this is AB, this is A prime, B prime, so this is going to be parallel, right? So this is about how the subsidies are going to affect a consumer's budget when you have either quantity subsidy or ad valorem subsidy or the lump sum subsidy. So yeah, I think it's clear. If in case there is any doubt, you may consider posting it in the comment section. So now let's move on to another case, which is the case of rationing on the budget. Now you would have observed in the public distribution system also we use this, I mean we come across this term generally, that is rationing. Now rationing, what it essentially means, that you cannot consume more than a certain amount of good. For example, government provides food in the form of wheat or rice like products, and after a fixed level of consumption you are not provided, for example only 5 kg of wheat is being provided in the public distribution shops per month to a ration card holder, okay, those who have these cards or so-called food stamps. Okay, so essentially what happens, say for example if you observe in this figure, so in this figure just observe, for example good 1 is being rationed, so you cannot consume good 1 beyond the point x1 bar. What does that mean? That means, say for example you have the basic equation m1 is equal to p1 x1 plus p2 x2. So I am fixing this x1, okay, to particular value. So the equation will be something like this: m equals p1 x1 bar, which means this is going to be constant x2. Okay, so once you avail this much amount of x1, you can not consume any amount of x1 beyond this point. Okay, but for x2 you have unlimited choice. So what essentially happens when you try to plot the budget line given this constraint, I'll give you just an example. You can draw it on the graph also. Say for example your income was 100, okay, price was 5 and x1 remains fixed. Okay, x1 is, say for example 6. Okay, this is your x1. Now this is fixed, remember that, plus x2 times 4. Okay, 4, it's a price of p2. So p1 is fixed, this is p1, or sorry, x1 is fixed, right? So x1 is fixed, x1 is fixed at 6, right? So this is going to be the case. Now if you try to plot this graph, okay, you will get to know, I mean if you try to change x1 x2 values, you have only one option, that you can change x2 only in this equation, right? So this is going to be fixed. Only before 6 units you can make the changes. You can make it 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, but you cannot go beyond 6. Okay, you can only choose 0 to 6 for the value of x1. Okay, so value of x1 is restricted between this interval. All right, so this is how the budget line will look. So only this region is feasible, this region is feasible, okay, the one shaded in the gray. But now also as highlighted in the figure also, you can read from there as well, that good 1 is being rationed here, and no more than x1 bar unit of good can be consumed by any consumer. So as a consequence, he cannot have this region as the feasible region, right? This is not feasible. All right, now also if you observe this figure as well, what happens when you are trying to consume more than this x1 bar, because was a restriction on this amount. If someone wants to have more of x1, so you have to pay more tax. Okay, so on x1, if he is paying tax, the consumer, he or she, if they are paying the tax, so what essentially it means that your equation for this line is going to change. How? Because see, for this line obviously you had m equals p1 x1 bar plus p2 x2, right? But now your x1 is going to get taxed if you are going to consume more than x1 bar. So this line will have the equation m equals, right, p1, okay, plus t times x1 plus p2 x2. Now the tax is going to be there in proportion of basically x1. This is what it essentially means to state that the more x1 you are going to consume, now you are going to get taxed, because this x1 which I have represented here, this x1 is lying in the interval, pardon me. Yeah, so this x1 basically, so this x1 is so I'll mention it here. Okay, now the x1 here in this second equation, x1 in 2, okay, is greater than x1 bar. This is the range. Okay, so this is what it essentially means, that any quantity greater than x1 bar, okay, for this good x1, you are going to be charged a tax. So the slope which will be resulting from this equation will be m is equal to the ratio of price and quantity, right? So minus p upon p1. What is p1 here? p1 plus t, right, upon quantity, p1 upon quantity. What is your quantity here? The quantity, p1 to that of ratio of the price 2, right? So minus p1 plus t upon p2, like what we have discussed earlier. So that's why it's mentioned here that this slope is going to be minus p1 plus t upon p2. So this is what essentially the impact is going to be. So if you want the graphical representation of any of the case which is not clear, you may consider commenting below the video, and I'll be happy to share the graphical representation for the same. So to summarize what we have discussed in this section of the chapter is that increasing income shifts the budget line outward. Like in the figure we observed that if your income is increasing, and if this is the initial case, for example AB, your budget line is going to shift, beg your pardon, yeah, so your budget line is going to shift outwards, right? So it will be shifting from AB to AB prime, right? So this is what it means essentially. Now for the second point, what is going to happen when the price or taxes or subsidies are going to take place? So for the price, we know that the rotation is going to be there. If the price of x1 is going to change, you observe that, say for example, if the price of x1 is going to increase, so you can consume less of x1, right? And if the price of x1 increases, decreases, the shift will be in this direction, right? So from AB to AB prime or AB double prime, if it's going to decrease, the price for x1 is going to decrease, right? So this is what we have understood. And finally, for taxes, we know that what kind of implication taxes have in terms of ad valorem tax, or the lump sum tax, or the quantity tax, right? Quantity based tax, which we have talked about. So thank you very much for your patient listening, and in the next chapter we will be discussing what we call the preferences of a consumer. So preference theory we will be switching to now. So if you like the content of these videos, please subscribe to our channel. So thanks again.